All right, so today's lecture is we're taking another look at scene structure. We looked at the short film, and the takeaway from the last lecture on the short film is it's basically the same thing, the same structure, it's just shorter, right? So if your short film is going to be 10 minutes, you might have 3 to 5 scenes. If your short film is going to be 20 minutes, you might have, you might have 3 to or 5 to 10 scenes, right? I average about 3 to 4 pages a scene, right? It's the math. The one thing that we need to know is that all movies, short films and feature films, episodes for pilots are all one gigantic conflict that is played out, and they're played out over beginning, middle, and end. That's what we talked about. And what we're moving towards is you selecting scenes, each of you selecting scenes that reflect your journey, whether you're doing a short film, whether you're doing a feature film. Your job now is to figure out what scenes are there. And what I need you to do, and I need to just make it a habit for everybody who wants to be a writer, is you need to start reading screenplays. Everybody in this class has selected a screenplay that they're going to read, and you're going to read the screenplay with the idea of finding the scenes in the screenplay, And the reason that we're going to find the scenes in the screenplay is so we can see the beginning, middle, and end. Here's an example of Clerks, independent film, which broke Kevin Smith, who broke Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, resulted in lots of things like Good Will Hunting, etc. But I'm looking for you to compile a list of scenes. But what I want you to do, and when you read a screenplay, is try to give me the beginning, middle, and end of that screenplay. Just do the best that you can. By reading a screenplay, it'll do 2 things. It'll help you see structure. You'll see a setup, a complication, a resolution, but you'll also see how scenes are constructed. And everybody should make it a habit now. Your goal now for this class is to construct your outline. Within a week, we're all going to bring our outlines here, and we're going to share our outlines, and we're going to talk about how we set it up, how we complicate it, how we resolve it. But what I really want you to think about is, what movies can you read? Not only see, I need you to see them and read them, because the reading of a screenplay is a very different experience than watching the movie. And I need you to get into a habit of reading screenplays. What screenplay will help you write your movie? And that is what I'm asking you right now. What screenplay? And it doesn't have to be, just because you're doing an animated movie, you don't have to read an animated screenplay. If it's a road trip movie, maybe you want to do Little Miss Sunshine, because that's a road trip movie with a group of family. If it's I'm looking for something that will inspire you to think about your story, because all we're doing now for the next really week is selecting scenes for your story. And we went over the 3-act structure. Remember, beginning, the middle, end, setup, complication, resolution, right? Create interest, hold interest, satisfy interest, right? The 3-act structure. This is really your scenes. That scene list that we looked at, that Clerks scene list. Here's another student who sent me her scene list, a finishing student. You can see it's called Silent on Target. You can see the 30+ scenes that identify her beginning, middle, and end for her movie. This is what I'm looking for all of you to have in a week, at the end of next week, surely by, when we meet again, after the holiday, the 4th of July. This is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the scene list, and it's not that hard. And what each scene list and what each scene is comprised of is a character, conflict, and an outcome. Character, conflict, and outcome. You can put the character, what character's in the scene, what's the problem, what happens, right? And there's the objectives, right, in the first act, right? You're going to have 3 parts to the first act. How does it start? The inciting incident. This is a review, right? How does it lock in? I'm looking for 5 to 10 scenes. Really, 10 scenes for your first act would be fantastic. Second act, right? We're on the road, right? There's a new plan, right? There's a setback. There's a point in the middle of the second act where your hero takes responsibility, right? And everything becomes about getting over this major test that sends us to the end of the second act. Again, another 10 to 20 scenes, right? And you're going to resolve it with a climax that satisfies all your spinal issues. Who's the hero? What's the goal? What's the conflict, problem, or villain that needs to be overcome, and what need is met, right? That is all. We've said that before, but I wanted to let this is where this is a lecture that is a little bit of, could be repetitive, but this is something we talk about in the industry a lot. We talk about the hero's journey. There's an anthropologist, right, named Joseph Campbell, who he studied myths, and he studied myths through all time, through religions, through stories, and he found that there's a structure in every culture of a hero, whether it be a religious figure like Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, right? Or if it's a character out of literature, whether it be a character Achilles out of the Iliad, right? Odysseus out of the Odyssey, any character that a culture identifies as heroic, a character that saves the culture, changes the culture. And as it evolved through time and goes all the way through time, well, in Hollywood in the 70s, George Lucas, who created Star Wars, first, as we talked about, that he had to prove that he could be a filmmaker. So he did his story. Remember, we talked about his personal story, American Graffiti, where he told the story of a young man who had to make a decision whether to leave or stay. One stayed, one left. Well, after that, he really had his sort of mythical story. And this is where everybody sort of goes eventually in storytelling. You have to, after you tell your personal story, you're going to tell your bigger story. Well, Lucas found that he found this anthropologist, Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell, I wrote a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. Well, at the studio at DreamWorks, there's this man named Christopher Vogler, and he took the hero's journey and he applied it to storytelling. And he uses Star Wars. And the reason he uses Star Wars is because Lucas took and transposed the 12 stages of the hero's journey, right, into storytelling. And it became a thing where a single person, right, goes out and transform not only himself, themselves, herself, but an entire culture, right? And it's the hero's journey, right? The hero's journey. What I'm going to tell you is when people talk about that, and there's 12 stages of the hero's journey that you should be familiar with. What I'm going to let you know is that there are 12 stages of the hero's journey, but it really is just another way to talk about the 3-act structure, to talk about beginning, middle, and end, to talk about setup, complication, resolution, create interest, hold interest, satisfy interest. But it's an interesting way to look at it. I have some students who have problems with thinking through structure. And this is what I say, here's an alternative to coming up with your outline. Come up with scenes, right? Come up with 2 to 3 scenes for each stage that I'm about to talk to you about. I'm going to do an analysis on the stages of the hero's journey and how they relate to the 3-act structure, right? I'm gonna let you know how they relate to the 3-act structure. You'll see the parallel. The one striking difference between the hero's journey and the 3-act structure is that the protagonist in the hero's journey is someone who changes themselves and their world, right? Whereas your movie, your hero might not transform, might not discover the force, might not just be like, if you guys ever watched the movies like The Matrix, The Lord of the Rings, Star Wars. These are heroes who go out on a quest, and because of this quest, they save a world, save a civilization. I'm going to argue that every single movie, no matter how small it is, even though your hero might only be transforming themselves, they might transform a family, like in Sunshine. They might transform a group, like in Dazed and Confused, a group that the quarterback is going to rebel and change and change. So this actually, maybe it's not as epic as Star Wars, right? But the transformation of an individual and the effect of that transformation of an individual has a profound effect on whatever world that person is in. So these stages are ways for you also to think about structure. And it's another way for you to think about structure in almost the same way. And I'm gonna literally do a side-by-side analysis. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to take your story out before I start. And I want you to think about your story. Maybe you have your story outlined, maybe you don't. If you don't have your story outlined, get out a piece of paper, pull up your word processor, and answer these questions, right? Remember, in the first act, beginning, how does your movie start? What is the hero like before the change? Let's be specific. Campbell calls this stage one, the ordinary world, right? A myth begins with the hero in his or her own element. What is your hero's world like before the change, right? Luke Skywalker, bored, right? Farm boy on a distant planet. No way this is going to be the Jedi who's going to face off and blow up the Death Star. As far away from possible, right? As far away as possible. A movie that I worked on, Kung Fu Panda, an animated movie, it's the same thing, right? Po is a panda who works in a noodle factory for his father, who's a duck, right? And he wishes he could be the dragon warrior, but he's just serving noodles, right? He loves karate. He's as far away as possible. So for you, the writer, what can you come up with scenes that show your panda in their restaurant, that show your farm boy on that planet, right? That show Neo, right? Before we learn that there's such thing as a matrix, right? That show, that show our Hobbit as far away from being on the quest from the rings as possible. What are those 2 or 3 scenes like that show the world where your hero is stuck and show who your hero is, right? Who your hero is. Now, I ask you to think ahead. Go to the end of your movie, right? Go to the very end of your movie and imagine, you can imagine whether it's going to be epic and you're going to blow up a Death Star, whether you're going to throw a ring into a fire, right? Or you're just going to save a family. Go as far away as possible and make this as different as possible. Contrast, a good idea to make your ordinary world as different as possible from, we call it the special world. A great example is the Wizard of Oz, right? Literally black and white Kansas. Dorothy is stuck in black and white Kansas, feeling underappreciated, and because of an inciting incident, where we're getting to the call to adventure, she's literally launched in a tornado and lands in another world. What is your ordinary world like, right? Do you have 2, 3 scenes that show us what your ordinary world's like? And that leads us up to the inciting incident. The thing that shakes up the world introduces change, right? The call from sunshine, the robot on the planet, right? I love what they call it here, the call to adventure. Isn't that better than the inciting incident? What is your call to adventure, right? A problem or a challenge, right? That shakes up the ordinary world, right? And this is really easy. It's Princess Leia. They send the holographic request to Obi-Wan asking for help. Help us, Obi-Wan. Help us, Obi-Wan. What is that moment? You have to know that. You should be able to write that down right now. What is your moment? What is your call to adventure? What scene starts your movie? What scene shapes up your movie, gets the story rolling? I like to call this the beginning, the real beginning of the story, but the call to adventure. What is the call, right? What is the call? Now, in the hero's journey, right? The hero always is not ready to become a hero. And the hero will hold back, will balk at the adventure, right? There are fears, and there's usually one of 2 things. There's the world is preventing the hero from leaving, or there's characters preventing your hero from leaving. So ask yourself, before your hero commits to the adventure, right? Before the spine locks over here in the 3rd act, right? What is it, right? What is it that is holding your hero back? And come up with scenes that reflect this. Come up with scenes. Is it a job? Is it a parent? Is it a relative? Is it a loved one, right? Is it a circumstance, a situation, whatever it is in your story? What is it? And there should be scenes that challenge your hero and make your hero think, I am not worthy of what it is I think I want. What I think I want. I'm not worthy of what it is I think what I want, right? And then they give the example here, the Skywalker refusing to join Obi-Wan, 2-minute responsibilities, right? And this is very, and you might not have this in your story, you might not have this clear, but in the hero's journey, there is always coming in along right with the refusal of the call. There's a mentor. There's a mentor. So ask yourself, look at those 6 characters that I've asked you to identify. Do you have an Obi-Wan? Do you have a mentor character? Do you have a character that is going to give advice that your protagonist doesn't quite understand? What is this force that you're talking about? What is this advice? Going back to Panda, Shifu, the mentor who did not want the panda, right? It's fantastic because we have a mentor here. If we flip it, Obi-Wan, of course, is trying to influence Luke. Luke resisted. Well, the opposite in Panda, Poe's like, wow, I got lucky. I landed it, and I had Oogway point at me, and I'm the dragon warrior. How fortunate am I, right? Well, what's preventing Poe from becoming the dragon warrior? His mentor thinks a mistake is made. He has a mentor who does not believe in him and does not want him. And the great thing about the mentor, when you're developing a mentor character, and it really goes, as I said, for every character, come up with a fresh type, right? Let's have a mentor we haven't seen before in your story, right? If you're gonna have a mentor figure, let's have someone we haven't quite seen. And the mentor will help force your character cross the line. And what do I mean crossing the line? Right, literally in the hero's journey, let's go over to here, the spine lock, right? What launches the hero onto the question? What makes us stop saying, what is going on? Who do I care about? To, oh my God, my hero wants this goal, must change this about themselves, and this is the conflict. It's all clear. No more waiting to find out what happens. Now we ask what happens next. Well, in the hero's journey, it's really the same thing, but we call it crossing the first threshold into the special world. In the hero's journey, we leave the ordinary world. We leave the desert planet and we head out into space. We leave Kansas and we go to Oz. We cross, and it's a big deal, right? It's a big deal, and it's a visual moment where everything is huge and different, right? The hero makes a decision to undertake the adventure, right? Leaving the familiar world behind, right? And entering the world of problems and challenges, right? Do you have that moment when your hero commits, right? And your hero's going to go whatever after whatever he or she wants? Is there some radical change in the world? Does your hero cross into somewhere he, she, or they, right, are unsure of? But there's that magic out there. There's the force out there, the elixir out there that needs to be sought, tamed, and brought back, right? And this is a big scene. This is a big scene. Now, let's say you don't have that, right? It's still, you still need to think of it and make it as spectacular as possible. The commitment needs to be a big, big scene, right? And you can say this is the critical action, of crossing in the first threshold is an act of will in which the hero commits wholeheartedly to the adventure. It's called the plot point or turning point in the traditional 3-act story, literally. So stage 5 is the end of Act 1 and Act 2. And Act 2, as we talked about in class 2 classes ago, Act 2 is the heart of the story. It's the part of the story where your hero changes, where the plan is, right? It's the new plan, right? And your hero is naive, does not take responsibility for his quest, influenced by others, right? And it's great. I love how they say test allies and enemies, stage 6. Test allies and enemies, right? Here's a series of scenes where your hero is going to confront the allies of his opponent. Remember, we did the character list, and Maybe you have the antagonist, whether it's a villain or not, and your hero has allies, but your antagonist has allies, right? So you're going to confront the allies of his opponent, right? The hero's also going to, in these tests, we're going to see the hero's weaknesses, right? We're going to see the hero's weaknesses. Remember, in this part of the movie, the test allies and enemies, where we make allies, we confront enemies, we see that your hero is not ready, right? Not ready. An example, a good example, is when Luke enters the dangerous world, and it's that great bar scene, right, where he runs into Han Solo, who's going to be an ally, right, that's chased in there by the stormtroopers, and they fly off, right, they literally fly off and deeper into the second act, right, being fired at, escaping with a Wookiee and a mentor, you know, on a ship about to be sucked into the most dangerous place, right? This is usually one of the best parts of a movie, right? And so many in the hero's journey, so many of these, the first part of the stage 6 are where characters cross, whether they're bars, right? You know, in the West, it's always when they walk into the saloon, right? To you know, they pass through a bar or saloon, right? Lots of places like Casablanca, where they're going in and out, where you meet, where people cross. Do you have a place, right, when you're on the road or wherever you are, where anything is possible, right? Where there's choices that are possible, and your hero is confronted with a conflict, which is an enemy, right? A solution, which can be meeting your scarecrow, getting your advice from Glenda, meeting your Tin Man. You're going down the road, the metaphoric yellow brick road. And that's the new plan, right? The beginning. Then I'm asking for 10 scenes, right? Here, stage 6 is pretty big, right? But stage 6 is going to lead you to stage 7, which is not quite the midpoint, right? And this is a great way to think about how to raise the stakes. Remember in the questions lecture, you know, that in the second act, one of the crucial things that we're trying to do is to raise the stakes, right? Checking your story step by step. Remember this? These are the concepts, right? This is basically derived from the 3-act structure. We set up, we got to meet everybody, the inciting incident, the debate, the reluctancy, the event that makes the story happen, right? When we get there, is there a time lock? These are all questions, a different lecture, but same principles apply. We establish the rules. Here we go. What are the stakes, right? What are the stakes? Well, the stakes need to rise, right? The stakes need to rise as your story progresses. And this is in the hero's journey. You go from stage 6, test, allies, and enemies, to, this is an interesting way to say it, the approach to the inmost cave, right? Send your hero to the thing that scares him, her, or they the most. Send them to the greatest danger. What's the greatest danger for Luke? It's pretty damn obvious. The Death Star, right? The Death Star, right? You must, you know, they literally get sucked into the Death Star. In the Wizard of Oz, where does Dorothy go? She sees Oz. You must go into the witch's castle. You must go to the place you don't want to be. So as you're working your way through this, getting to your midpoint, right, getting in the middle of your second act, where is the most dangerous place for your hero to go? What is the most dangerous place for your hero to go? What are those most dangerous scenes? Who's the most dangerous place? What's the most dangerous world they can go? Death Star. Who's the most dangerous person? Darth Vader, that they can confront, right? So in the hero's journey, the logical progression that raises the stake is the hero enters the place of the greatest danger, the world of the antagonist. Think about that, the world of the antagonist. So we need to get into the world of the antagonist. It's time to make, right? It's time to make the preparations, right? Luke gets into the Death Star, right? Into the place of highest danger, right? And again, the highest stakes, Dorothy and Castle, Luke and Death Star. Ask yourself, as you're fleshing out your second act, maybe you can't get all of the scenes. Who is the person? What is the place that your hero is most afraid of? Send them there. Send them there, right? And this literally is the hardest thing for people. This is where movies fail. After you send the person into the most dangerous place, a lot of writers will just get them out of there real quick without a significant test and get them into the climax, get them into the third act. I don't want you getting into your third act that easily. I do not want you getting into your third act that easily. What I'm looking for is I want you to test. Campbell calls this the Supreme Ordeal, right? The major test. In three-act structure, it's just the major test, but I like to say the Supreme Ordeal as well. I kind of like stole this and moved this over here. There's a test in the second half of the second act. It's this Supreme Ordeal. It's where your hero must fail, right? An apparent defeat, a failure that transforms your hero, right? Luke is literally trapped in a giant trash crusher and is sucked underwater, and appears that it's over, right? You're literally, Dorothy is trapped in the castle and the hourglass has flipped over, and when this is over, you're dead, right? In the hero's journey, and this is getting into Buddha, Christ stories, Achilles stories, all of the hero stories, Neo, all of them. There's an apparent death and rebirth, right? There's a change in this section, the Supreme Ordeal. The hero is different, right? Hero's not the savior, doesn't understand the force, is not going to sacrifice him or her or their selves for a society yet. But in this series of scenes, there's a huge change, right? It's not the climax, though. Don't confuse this with the climax. It's the hero's first huge test. We get the plans for the Death Star. We get the plans, right? And that's where that's the same exact thing over here. The hero must face a critical failure and apparent defeat. Wisdom, ability to succeed comes in here. So think about your story. Even if you don't have the specific scene, you've set your hero up, you've launched your hero on this journey. Your hero's naive. Your hero goes to that dangerous place, faces that person or place he or she doesn't want to be, right? What is the test? What is the test that transforms your hero, but your hero has not solved the world's problems, right? The world, meaning the world that your hero is going to heal, like, Christianity, heal, the Old Testament to New Testament type of stuff, right? And then in the next stage, right, getting out of the second act, but really the hero's journey is very specific. The hero gains power, right? Seizing the sword, right? Seizing the sword. The hero gains power with this new power. Now, this is not like in all stories, there's not always the epiphany, right? The better understanding, but they gain power. We see the understanding of the force, right? We have the plans for the Death Star, right? There's a celebration, there's an uptick, right? So we've left, right? We've left this darkest hour, right? We've left this low point, right? We're out of the trash compactor where we've made it out, right? And this is the equivalent in the third act, the enlightenment moment of clarity, right? I told you in the great structured movie, Saving Private Ryan, where there's an understanding of who they are and what they're about to do. That's different than understanding the force, right? And so depending on your story, right, the epiphany, the understanding, it doesn't matter. As long as it all adds up, as long as all of these scenes pay off and we go forward from an enlightenment, a moment of clarity, the hero understands how to confront the central conflict, right? You don't need to be again, having Luke get into the TIE fighter and there's a sort of a celebration and he's going to go up, right? It's not always, like literally the upbeat, but there is an understanding. And that's why I'm saying, like, people said, well, this is why the hero's journey, structure it's not a one size fit all, but it's not, but it's the up and down. It's the epiphany, right? It's the epiphany. And that's what I hope that you realize is that everything that your hero went through, from stuck in the ordinary world to grinding through the first half of the second act, to going to the place he, she, or they are most afraid of, by standing up to somebody they're most afraid of, and by getting out of what they're most afraid of, there's got to be an understanding. And it's usually a scene in your first draft. And this will go to anyone who's rewriting their script. But the first draft, you're going to miss this scene. You're guys going to go blow right by this scene. In the story Rocky, which is Sylvester Stallone wrote in 2 weeks, right? And it's a fantastic screenplay about someone who didn't believe in himself and becomes, a hero at the end. Does not win the heavyweight championship, but is standing at the end. Well, Stallone missed the seizing the sword or the epiphany moment in the script, but realized that as he was shooting the movie, that he needed a quiet moment with his love, Adrian, and he just needed to look at her and say, I don't care if I win, I just want to be standing. And if I'm standing, I can respect myself and other people can respect me. And it's sort of his epiphany, like, I don't have to win. I can't possibly win, but if I'm tough enough to be standing, and it's a very chilling moment. That wasn't in the original screenplay. And this is what I'm saying. You might not have this in your screenplay, but those of you who are watching this and you're like looking at your outlines, you're trying to fix your screenplay, it's a very important moment as we get into the third act, where it's that chilling moment where there is a deeper understanding of your hero, your protagonist's purpose in the world that he, she, or they are in. And it really affects us when we see that moment, so it's something that you need to be aware of and look for, whether it's your first pass through, where, most of you are doing, or whether you're trying to fix it, right? And that's the beginning of the second act. The third act is the understanding, right? Now, in the hero's journey, right, your hero comes back, right? Like in Panda, Poe, he comes back to the temple to get the scroll, right? Luke comes back to the rebel base before going back out, right? So your hero returns to the ordinary world. This is not a formula, right? But it happens, right? It happens a lot where the hero comes back to the ordinary world, right? There are still dangers and problems, right? And the hero is like, hey, look at me, to the people he, she, or they have left behind. Like, I think we have a chance, right? I think they have a chance. But this is key in stage 10, right? Even though the hero comes back to the ordinary world, there's pressure building, right? Pressure building. And, this is a way of breaking out the climax into, a road back. Whereas the climax, the way we talked about it last time, it's the payoff, the central conflict, goals achieved, this series of scenes. Well, this is a way, if you're doing the hero's journey and your hero leaves home, right? And then your hero comes back, right? The road, we're like stuck here, right? Stuck here before we get back. In the Wizard of Oz, it's not quite home though, but she gets back to Oz and she realizes that I'm not home yet. Everybody leaves. Wizard flies off. She's kind of stuck there, right? It's kind of stuck there. Luke is literally home and he's getting ready to go off to the Death Star to confront, right, his greatest fear. Now, here's the biggest difference between the hero's journey, right? The hero's journey, the resurrection, and the climax, right? The resurrection is in the hero's journey. Your hero doesn't only achieve goal, dramatic need answered, right? Has confidence, got away from somebody bad, right? Conflict, problem solved, villain defeated. There's a resurrection, and this is the big difference. There is a resurrection, right? Luke's almost killed by Darth Vader, fights back, wins, right? Understands the Force. There's the understanding of the greater good, right? Neo frees us all from the Matrix, right? We are a new personality. Not we, your hero is a new person, is a different person, has arced and changed. A great example of this, more contemporary example than Luke, is the Robert Downey Jr. character in the Avengers, right? And there's two ways to look at it. The first Iron Man movie is a great, 3-act structure, hero's journey. Selfish man, right? Hedonistic man, playboy, selling weapons to destroy the world, right? Gets blown up, stuck in a cave, has to get out of the cave, is reluctant, does have the mentor figure who sacrifices himself for Iron Man and tells Iron Man, when you get out here, you need to make a difference. He flies out as Iron Man. He realizes the people he thought were his allies were his enemies, right? Jedediah is really the enemy. People aren't who they think they are, right? He goes back to the most dangerous place and he sees that what his weapons are really being used for, right? Then he is tested by his own, friend, right? Jedediah. And he has to, he's confronted and his heart is literally pulled out from him, right? Literally pulled out from him, but he gets it back. He gets Pepper to give him, replace his power source, and he's allowed to go back and fight and shut down his company and essentially create the Avengers, right? And the world is a better place. Now that is the structure for the first Iron Man movie, like it's a structure for the first Star Wars movie. Well, it's actually for the first Iron Man movie to all of the Marvel movies, if you include Civil War, especially when you look at the Avengers movies, the first Avenger movie, he almost dies. This is the same pattern. He becomes a better hero. He flies the nuke off and saves us and closes the portal, right? But it keeps building, right? Whereas he fails in Endgame, not in Endgame, in the Infinity Wars, he fails, and eventually he does sacrifice and allows himself to be sacrificed, losing everything he loves for the world, right? So in a sense, it's almost like a TV series, the way that it's up, because there's 12 plus episodes, but it's his journey. It's the Tony Stark journey, right? And if you just look at it in common sense, he goes from a selfish individual to someone who's going to protect society. And he goes from someone who's willing to protect society to someone who's willing to give up his own family to make the world a better place, right? That is the hero's journey. And Marvel used that to great effect to make billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars. Star Wars, don't tell me that when the Obi-Wan series out, the Boba Fett series out, the Mandalorian, this world just keeps going and going and going. And we have the little Yoda, in the Mandalorian that actually sees Luke, they de-age Luke. This mythic structure, that the first Star Wars set up that paid off at Jedi, and they went back and they showed Anakin's fall. This mythic structure, when you have a story, this is what I'm going to tell you. Your first story that you write, I want you to do the personal story if you can, right? I want you to do, you follow your dream, right? What is your dream? What is your whiplash? What is your swingers, right? Or your coming of age, your American Graffiti, your Dazed and Confused, right? Or your dysfunctional family, your Greek wedding, becoming, or your sunshine. But eventually you're going to run out of the personal stories. You're going to run out of the short stories. When you come up with the hero changed the world story, the Iron Man story, and there's a reason they chose Iron Man, because he was so flawed and he was able to arc and change. Your Luke story, whatever that story is, and you make it fresh. You change the protagonist. You give us someone we haven't seen. Let's don't have that cliched mentor. Let's don't have that cliched hero, right? You do, and this is what Panda works so well, because Poe is the most unlikely person to save a world, right? Someone who all he thinks about, he's a comic character, is the food, right? The dumplings. How do you do this? Learns how to harness that, his power, and use that power to become the quote unquote dragon warrior. And his dragon warrior, right? The skadoosh at the end, learning that the blank scroll, that you're all in yourself, it's the same thing as the Force. It's the same sort of pattern that has that beginning, middle, and end pattern, right? I just want you to be aware of it. You don't need it for the screenplay that you're writing, right? Some of you are writing short films. Some of you, are writing personal dramas, but you just need to be aware of the transformative nature of the 3-act structure combined with the hero's journey. So that a simple way for you to think about this, and these are questions. So this is sort of like, this is from his book. This is from Vogler's book. This is an analysis of the stages of his book. You know, this is again, this is the 3-act structure, but I've made it even simpler for you. Just the way I've given you checking your story, this tool here for you checking your story step by step. When you're coming up with your scenes, I want you to ask in the beginning, to ask yourself these questions. You know, how are you setting it up? Are we seeing the who, when, where, why? You know, what is the inciting incident? You're going to take, and you're going to ask yourself the questions. Are there other stakes raising? These are questions you're going to always ask through your outline, through your writing, you know, all the way to the midpoint, the big test, all of that. I've also taken a series of questions for you that are let me get the hero's journey questions. These are questions that may or may not apply to your story, but these are questions that, now that I've kind of tracked you through the hero's journey, right, that you should just ask yourself at any point of the development process. Whether you're sitting here with your 250 words, whether you've just pitched me, whether you're writing your outline, maybe you're scratching out your outline right now. Maybe you have your outline and now you need to fix your outline. You need to make your outline work, right? You make your outline work. Maybe you've written your screenplay, just your first act. Now I have a lot of people in development have good first act and they're trying to work their way through the story, right? Maybe you have a screenplay and we're trying to get a polish, right? These are questions that might give depth to your story. This is not me just giving you this overview. You know, I've just talked to you for 20, 30 minutes on what this is, right? I'm gonna get rid of this, right? I'm not going to talk to you about, hey, oh, I love this. I got rid of the 3-act stuff. These are the 2 documents that I want you to keep consulting over and over again. These are concepts you need to, questions and concepts you need in order of development that you should ask yourself. But here's some questions that come straight from the hero's journey that you ask yourself about your hero, your hero's world, and the overall structure. And sometimes this won't pertain to your story, but one of these questions will. So wherever you are on the developmental process, whether you've just finished your pitch, whether you just developed your pitch, or you're trying to just polish your screenplay or crack your outline, right? I'm going to walk you through these. I'm going to talk to you about these questions, right? So we start your story in the ordinary world, right? Ask yourself, do the scenes that you have selected, are attempting to select, do they show how your hero's story is incomplete, right? Do they indicate what about your hero? What single characteristic, Iron Man, hubris, pride, right, could lead to your hero's downfall? He's drinking in the desert, he's cocky, right? What characteristic, and can you put that in a scene? What is that thing that could cause your hero to crash? What is it thing can make your hero, could save your hero? The longing to get off this planet, right? The need for justice, right? What is that single characteristic that could save your hero? Crush, and you know what? That should be in one of the first 2 or 3 scenes of your movie. I should see how your hero's story is incomplete. I should see a scene that says, oh, this is the flaw. Remember we talked about the flaw? This is the flaw. Or this is the thing that could save. This is the potential that could save. Do you have that, right? Call to adventure, right? When we talk about your call to adventure, your inciting incident, have I seen this before? You know, if we've seen this before, I don't want to see it again, right? Make the call original, not cliche. A cliche call, you know, with a wise old mentor, you know, the robot coming, whatever. If I've seen the call before, you need to try to make it unique. It's okay to start with a cliche. And this is one thing about writing. Cliche is not bad. Cliche just means we've seen it over and over and over again. And the first time writer, you start with what we've seen before. But you know what? Now that you're looking at your outline, now that you're looking at your scene, I've kind of seen it done this way before. Somebody's made a wish, somebody's been hypnotized, right? Somebody's been kidnapped. Freshen it up. Because this is one of the call to adventure is really the beginning of the story. And if it's a way we haven't seen it before, it draws us into the story and it makes people interested in your story. Now, before we get into your second act, the refusal of the call, whether you're doing the hero's journey or not, this section of your outline of your screenplay, right? These are questions that you should ask. What is your protagonist really afraid of? Afraid of a loved one, afraid of a parent, afraid of really finding love, afraid of leaving the security of home, right? Afraid of going back home. I need in this refusal, this reluctancy, show us what your hero is afraid of, but also show us, are these fears true? Are they false, right? Give us an indication. Is this something? And this is where we start touching on dramatic irony, right? Where we can see more than your hero can see, and we can see, oh, this would be good if they did this. Oh, no, don't, right? Can they be overcome, right? What fears are real, what fears are false, right? Show it. And this is, again, we talk about, you can use dramatic irony. You can show us more than your hero knows, right? As we start playing with this. If you have a mentor, right? Do you have a full-blown mentor? If you do, I'm going to repeat myself what I said earlier, right? You need to make this mentor a Shifu-like mentor. I don't mean like that mentor has to hate your protagonist. I mean, your mentor needs to be someone we haven't quite seen before. You know, we don't need old white guy with a beard anymore. We've had enough Harry Potters and Obi-Wans, etc. But a cool, fresh mentor, as a full-blown mentor, right? Freshen up the type is great. Now, you might not have a mentor, and you're going to go, okay, why? I don't have a mentor. You might have a series of characters who share the role of mentor, right? There could be a group of friends. There could be dual parents. There could be siblings who are sharing the role of mentors. If you do have this, why do you have this, right? Is it necessary? Can we combine them? Can we make, because one mentor is stronger, but you know, maybe it can be divided up, right? Identify who is giving, and this will go all the way to the middle of your movie, who is giving your hero courage and true understanding so he, she, or they can become what it is they become. Crossing the first threshold. This is getting out of your first act, right? Is your hero willing or not willing, right? Some are gung-ho and the world is holding them back. Ask yourself, right? Are there guardians that prevent the crossing, right? Is there somebody there saying, nope? Or is there somebody there saying, you know, like, we better get the hell out of here, right? How do we make it difficult? This scene to commit, you know, is a big change, is a big scene. So crossing into the first threshold, especially if you have a character who's going to be savior-like, you know, it's a big deal. And there's often somebody who needs to be confronted on the cross. Test allies, enemies, right? And I said this before, but ask yourself in your second act, how is this different? How is the special world, the new world, different than the ordinary world, right? Is your hero tested by new allies who they don't want to agree with? Maybe they're not quite understanding the force. Are they false allies? Are they not real allies, right? And in this section, when do we see the enemy? When does the hero see the enemy? You know, in the test ally section, when does the enemy show up? This is usually a point of no return, right? Something happens, a planet blows up, you know, a home is destroyed. There is some reason why there's no going back. As I said, the huge advantage to asking yourself the hero's journey method is the instant raise the stakes. Approach it to the inmost cave, go into the most dangerous place, right? Your hero might not have hit the midpoint, might not be fully committed, right? But sending the hero to the most dangerous person in the most dangerous place will commit them. This is the click, this is the turn, right? And this is the question that everybody has to ask, whether you're doing the hero journey or not. Is there a literal cave, the Death Star, or is it an emotional place, right? And if it's an emotional, that means this is where your hero needs to confront the person who is emotionally the most dangerous person for this. You know, in Sunshine, it's when the wife says, you know, calls him a loser, and you know, when he doesn't get the deal, that basically we feel that the relationship is over, right? So is the most dangerous place for your hero to go a literal place, a cave, a Death Star, right? A castle that contains the witch, the evil Jedi, Darth Vader, father, or is it the emotional journey? We have to stand up to a parent, we have to stand up to a wife, we have to stand up to somebody, right? Which pops us into the ordeal. This is a question for those of you who really are done with your outlines, maybe even have drafted your script. Do you have a real test, right? Can you name it? If you can't name it, is the test big enough? Because this is the section of your movie where your character arcs changes, right? Is there death in the ordeal or the test, right? Is there the death, meaning do we face death? Are there tragic stakes? Are the stakes literally life and death? Or, you know, is it just sort of a metaphorical death, you know, like losing identity, losing who you are, letting go, right? What is at stake in this test? And this is, you might not realize if you have a villain, Darth Vader, or is it a witch antagonist? This is really in this test portion, you're going to figure that out, because if it's a villain, you're saving that villain. You know, this is a test. We're close, right? We're confronting it. But if it's an antagonist, you might defeat the antagonist here, right? You might melt your witch, but you still have a problem to solve, right? And this is where you really should ask that question. Is this where, in this test, if I confront my villain and defeat my villain, how do I have the rest of the movie? Because you have a problem. Remember, we talked about that. And you might not know this while you are going through your outline phase. You might not even know this when you've written your first movie, but is this The Hangover? Is this The Wizard of Oz? Or is this Star Wars, right? Do you have an antagonist, right? Or is this the villain? It's very important in the ordeal to realize this, you know, real villain or simple antagonist. We get through the test, right? Does your hero realize she's changed, right? And if they don't realize it, they should be beginning to realize that they've changed, because we want to see the arc. If they don't, why not, right? Why put them through the test if we don't see real change, right? We need this is really what the dramatic need. I list here, has he or she learned to deal with and face the inner flaws? This is the question that you posed in your pitch. What does your hero need to change? Have these actions, have this test, has this journey caused your hero to face the dramatic need, fear of failure, need to be courageous, getting away from home, learning to love home, right? We need to see the beginning of the arc. And then on the road back, again, we're going back to the, you know, as we're getting through the third act here. That third act is a simpler, you know, in here, the lowest low, the big test, lowest low, moment of clarity, climax, new order, right? Well, the road back is the rededication. Okay, it's low, right? There's the lowest low, but I think I know how to do it, right? And there's often, this is where dramatic irony comes in. This is where we see the laser pointing at the rebel base. You know, this is where we realize that the clock is running out, right? getting ready to face the ultimate test, right? The climax, right? Paying off all spinal elements, right? And in the resurrection, in the hero's journey, I need you, when you're looking at your outline and when you're looking at your script, that in the hero's journey, and really in all movies, but especially in the hero's journey, I need an active hero. I need a hero who is willing to dedicate to the quest. So this is real simple for everybody. Look at your climax. Who is taking the action, right? There should be, the mentor should be not even in this scene. Mentor's either gone, left behind, or dead, right? You might have an ally who pushes your hero, right? You know, Han Solo like blows up a fighter so Luke can get in and use the Force, right? But I need your hero. In the hero's journey, I need your hero to be active and take the greatest degree of action. The greatest degree of action, right? It's Poe needs to be face to face with Tai Lung and do this skadoosh, and you know, use the move that no one has been able to move, right? It's big moment, right? Big moment. And finally, the rebirth, right? Is there a rebirth, right? And this is the question that you ask at the end of your movie. Is it a rebirth that changes the world, a community, or a family? And that's what I said at the beginning. The world, man, you're dealing with something that is a tentpole pitch movie. You know, you got a Hunger Games going on here, right? You got a Star Wars going on here. You got a Matrix going on here. All of those sort of iconic, like, we're gonna make gigantic movie, right? A community, right? Changing a community, right? You know, maybe it's not, you know, maybe it's a, you know, a romantic comedy. Often they come back better, right? Change the community, family, sunshine. It's enough for a family, for the arc to change. Hero's journey, you know, questions. These are questions that I want you to come back to. This is a series of questions that I want you to keep utilizing while you're outlining. All of your goals right now, everybody, the new members of the class, and people that you need to be thinking of your outlines. You need to be pouring through your outline. Those 10 scenes to set up, the 20 scenes to complicate and test, and the 10 scenes to resolve. Asking yourself these questions as you get through. No such thing as writer's block, right? This is what we do when we write. We come up with an outline. This outline doesn't allow us to have writer's block, right? This outline is right here. See this outline? This outline, we know where to go. We know who's in the scene. We know exactly what's going to happen. We know what's going to, so we sit down and we just sit down and we write one of these scenes, right? It's great. She has the list of her characters and she has her steps, right? You know what the next step is. So you write the next step and you get as many steps as possible. So, and you send them to me. So there's a beginning, middle, and end. Maybe you don't, maybe you're done with the class. You can't send them to me. You need to see the beginning, middle, and end. Series of conflicts that tell a story. Then you begin to write. You write your first act. You just write your first act all the way through your first act. You finish your first act. You read through your first act. You see how your first act flows, right? And then the next lecture, the next couple lectures, we're going to go from choosing your scenes to actually writing your scenes. But I really still want you focused on your scenes, right? How do you have your 30 scenes? Can we get more than your 30 scenes? Can we sharpen these scenes? Can we make these scenes better? And the hero's journey is just another way for you to think about beginning, middle, and end, arcing a character, right? Like challenging a character. It's not, you know, it's sometimes people think it's cliched. It's not cliched. It's just another tool in your kit, so to speak. It's just another tool in your kit. And this is the boiled down questions. Now, the reason that I give you the 6 pages is so you don't have to read the entire book, just like I gave you all of my quotes from the thesis. So you can see that this 3-act structure is a thing that is real, right? That Sid Field and Lou Hunter, you know, they're real people who thought about how to structure screenplays and write screenplays. What I'm giving you is a step-by-step method. You should now be able to list out scenes. Give me scenes that are active scenes, right? That have character conflict outcome. And I want them to go across, right? And I want them to go down. I want the horizontal and I want the vertical. The vertical is like, oh, here's the scene, and I want to see beginning, middle, and end of story. An outline, as I said earlier, is your story. You're actually writing your story now. You're not summarizing, you're picking potential scenes. And then when you write the scenes, they will change and they will transform. But this is a really big deal for the next week for you to really think about your story, right? I'm asking you to read screenplays. I'm asking you to read screenplays, looking at what a scene is, the beginning, middle, end of the scene, trying to identify scenes out of those screenplays, make it a habit of becoming a screenplay reader. But I want you to go from idea now to a list of scenes. If you can go from idea from a list of scenes, we can transpose those lists of scenes into a screenplay, you know, whether it's a feature, a short, or a pilot. That's our goal. And that's the job, the task ahead. And that's the conclusion of this lecture that I'm